Hi there friends, welcome back to another video on paying it forward. In this video it's pretty exciting because it's related to a blog post on the Microsoft Developer Blog that I was just able to put out, and this is kind of the accompanying video to help walk you through exactly how to do the tasks that are mentioned in that. So let's just jump straight into it. Alright, so what you'll need for this particular exercise is you'll need an Azure subscription, and you'll need Power Automate, of course, as well. And what we're going to do first for the purposes of the blog is that we're going to create an Application Insights instance, so we can use that within the scope of the error handling procedure that we're going to have. So I'm just going to come straight into the Azure tenant, and I'm just going to come and create a resource. Just put in App Insights. Then you'll see that you have the Microsoft Application Insights over here. We'll just kind of go through the necessary things to create it. All right, we've got the key details here, just putting it in a resource group, the error handling demo. I'm not going to check anything else. All right, so the Application Insights instance is now deployed. And let's get on with the actual example. So I'm going to use this flow here that I've created. This is a quick example. It's very basic in terms of what it shows. But what it does is it uses a manual trigger to basically get the forecast for today and then post that in a Teams chat or channel. And so if I just give you a quick example of what success would look like, if I just manually trigger the flow, then I can put in a city. So put in Brussels in Belgium. You can see the flow is running, and then I should get a message here saying it's mostly cloudy here. Light rain showers. These are some test ones that I was doing a minute ago. However, let's say if the user or the person using this flow put in the wrong city, just mashing the keyboard, and you can see it's obviously come back with an error and it says not found. So the key point that I'm trying to make here is what happens when you're building, a production flow that you're using for your system, and someone puts in the wrong entry or there's an error that happens. How do you find a suitable way of tracking that consistently, and both being able to report upon it, the first of all, but also being able to kind of get notified of it as well. So through the course of, let's say, research and a lot of different, I've seen multiple different approaches and threads on this particular one. I felt it was useful to kind of consolidate some of those practices. And when we built a production application here within Microsoft that we're using for contracting, that I've spoken about in some of my other videos before, we implemented this, let's say, approach to managing errors. And we got a lot of feedback from people saying that it was pretty interesting. And they thought that other people would be able to benefit from it too. So let's take what the blog post about error handling says and let's apply it to this particular flow that we have here. All right, so the first part of that is let's come into edit and let's use scopes. So you'll probably see that in the blog post I talk about using a scope, which is this here. And as mentioned in the example, we're going to call this a try scope. And this is basically taking the steps that we want to see if there's any errors happening in them and grouping them by a try scope. We're then going to have here some other scopes. Going to do another one here, which we're going to call catch. And this would catch any errors that we have. And this is the catch. Finally. What we want to then do is configure the run after for each of these different scopes so that they can basically perform specific actions that will make them kind of mimic this approach of catching errors. So the first one we're going to come to is catch, and then you'll see here on the settings we have the run after, and it will then determine whether or not the try step was successful. In our case, we want to see if it failed. So we're just going to click the failed option. And then for finally, we're also going to configure this. And we've got if catch was successful, but we also want to see if try was successful as well. So that basically will then create this kind of routing that we get where we have the catch step being the one that picks up the errors, and the finally step running regardless on whether try worked or whether catch basically completed as well, because then we see the overall outcome of what we've expected. So if we just run quickly the example that we had a second ago, again using this new approach, and I just mashed the keys again in the example, you'll basically see that the try scope failed and then the catch step ran. And because there's no actions in the try step, finally didn't obviously do anything. So we're now at a point where we've actually been able to direct the outcomes of the try step into another scope, so that we can then use that step to basically then, take the actions to report the error and, notify us about it. So let's come and go back into edit, and let's start entering in the steps that we want to be able to do. So what we need to do here is filter an array. So just this one here. And when we talk about which array we want to filter, we want to do the result of the try step, which is obviously this one just above it. And then we want to do an advanced mode query. So it says here as or equals to, and in here we're going to drop in an expression. This is all provided in the blog post, but we're going to basically look to see if the error of the item that caused an error, we're going to filter the array, because we don't want to see any of the actions that were successful. We only want to see the ones that either failed or those that timed out. So we've added that in there, and we can just say here, check for errors. Okay, and then the next step that we want to do is we want to be able to see what the flow name is. And so as I mentioned in the blog post, this would be basically adding an extra compose step. Because if you have multiple flows and you use the same error handling in each one, being able to identify the name of the flow is really helpful. So you know kind of which one it's coming from. And again, I've provided in the blog post the expression that you need to provide here, which is obviously using the workflow, the tags, and then the flow display name. All right, and then now would be the step where we want to be able to log the errors actually within Application Insights. So this is where we're going to use a HTTP call for doing that. So if we come to HTTP, and we're going to do a HTTP request, and then I've obviously here provided the details of both the URI, the method, which is a post, the headers, which I've provided here as well. All right, so you can obviously see here we've got the details for the headers entered, but we don't have the API key or the XAPI key provided. And the reason for that is that I don't want to hard code them directly into the flow. I want to be able to retrieve those from the Azure portal using Key Vault. So this is something in addition to what I wrote in the blog post, but it's a good best practice. So if we come over to the Azure and we create a Key Vault, which you can see here, we're just going to go through and do the other things again. All right, so I've created a Key Vault, which we've got here, and I want to store the instrumentation key and also the API key within a secret. So the first thing I just wanted to mention, which can sometimes be a little bit confusing when you first come into Key Vault and use it for the first time, is that even if you're the administrator of the subscription that you're using, you don't actually have permission by default. So you need to come into access control here and add a role assignment and select the correct one which you would need. I use Key Vault Administrator, and that then allows me to create new secrets within here and be able to access them as well. So I've got my Application Insights over here. I'm going to copy the instrumentation key, and then I'm going to come back here to Key Vault, and I'm going to put generate, and I'm going to call this the instrumentation key error handling. Then put the secret in here. You can set an activation or an expiration date if you wish to. I'm also going to generate an API for accessing this application as well. When generating it, make sure that you use right annotations, because that will be important for it to be able to actually write errors from the API call to App Insights. All right, so I'm going to do another secret here, which is the error handling API key. Put my secret in there. If you come in, add here an action, And if you type in Key Vault, you'll see here you have the Azure Key Vault and you have get a secret. And then here it will ask you what's the name of the secret. So I need to get the error handling API, the I key, and also I'm going to do the old copy and paste because that can be helpful when you want to do that here. So this one will be the API key. So here, get instrumentation key. And then here's get the API key. All right, and so now rather than pasting or hard coding the values, you can obviously manage it through the authenticated connection to Azure to the Key Vault. The big value of keeping it in Azure, of course, is it's secure, and being able to, if you change App Insights instance or something moving forward, you can always manage the details directly through there. So when selecting the value of the instrumentation key in this particular example, make sure you select the body and then the value of the secret. Same for the API key. So you have both of those in there. All right, so let's continue populating it with the body that I'm copying and pasting from the blog post. You can kind of see there's the information here. And it asks you here to insert the instrumentation key in the example that I provided. So you can see I'm going to do that here, which is the body value of the instrumentation key. We've got the data here, the name of the flow. We've got the action name, the status, the message, and the workflow URL. Again, these are all things that I provided directly within there. You can, if you want to, give it a unique name, obviously. You could say something like power automate error message for, and then I'm just taking the name of the flow, which is in this one. Something like that, just to make it look nice. And then you can just hit save. All right, so we've got the ability to post the events to App Insights. Let's give this a go. So I'm just going to mash the keys. All right, so you can see it ran successfully. It was able to return the instrumentation and the API key. You can see here that we've returned the flow name, which is the weather checker. Now let's come to Application Insights and see if we were able to actually capture the log of the event. All right, so after a couple of minutes, when we come into App Insights and we look in the events section, we can actually see the issue come up here. So we can click on the information, and then you can actually see, the information and where it went wrong. So it says that the error was associated to the get forecast for today. The status of it was failed, and this is the link to the workflow. And the reason why this can be helpful is that when it comes to, reviewing your issues and going back to them, you can then use that URL directly to go to where the error happened and be able to look it up. So this is all good and well. We've now got the error logged into Application Insights. How do we now also add an additional layer, which is to then, be able to send this in Teams to notify, let's say, the engineers that there's been an error. Or it could be that we create an Azure DevOps work item to notify that there's a bug or something in the system. So, you could approach this from all kind of different ways. In the example that we're using, we use a Teams notification. So that's what we're going to build into the flow on this one. All right, so now that we know that that's worked, let's come back in here and now let's add in the Teams part, which is the notification part. All right, so the first thing we want to do is to be able to actually create a table so that when we send a message, we don't just get it in like a blur of text and that it comes across pretty nicely. So what I'm going to do here is add a table. So I create a HTML table. So we're going to create it from the array that we got in the beginning, which was obviously checking for errors. So it's the body of the checking for errors step. And we then need to now put in the columns that we want to have, and we're going to use custom. So we're going to basically add the following headers. So we're going to have the name of the action. We're going to have the name of the status, similar to what we saw in App Insights, the error message, and then also the workflow URL. It might be that you also want to put in the name of the flow, so we can add that one in as well. Let's just put that in here. So the flow name. And then we want to be able to return each of the items that we need for this particular table. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to fill in the action. We're going to add an expression, and we're going to put in the first output of the check for errors step, and we're going to pick the name. The second one is the status, which we want to put this in here and update the status. Third one is the actual error message, which is a little bit longer. The workflow URL is obviously the one that I provided before. And then the flow name, we've actually got that from the HTTP step here, which is the name of the flow. And it's the outputs of the flow name step. So we can just add that even here. So we can go to the outputs of the flow name. All right, so we've got some information now nicely formatted in our table. Now what we want to do is to be able to use the outputs of that table and post it in a Teams channel. So let's just put post to Teams. Just going to open it up, and we're going to post a message in a chat or a channel. We're going to do it as the Flowbot just because it's easy. And we're going to go to that same Teams channel. Actually, let's just create a separate one for a second, just for fun. So we're going to add a channel. Let's call it error handling notifications. And then in our flow here, can see that we have a separate channel, and we're just going to post the table in there. So we basically got the table now as well. All right, so let's give this one a run and kind of see what this would look like in terms of how it shows up. We should now have a message posted. So you can see we get this nice little table provided here, but it seems that we're missing the error message. I bet you I typed it in wrong. So let's go back and correct that. All right, so after a bit of backwards and forwards, we can now see what the actual error message would look like in the example here in the channel. So you obviously have the action, the status, the error message, the workflow URL, and the actual flow name. And as I mentioned before, because you have the URL within this section here, this can actually help you to then go and directly, correct the error that you would have within the flow as it in situ, and know which specific run it was that was causing the issue. All right, so there's a couple of final things that I want to show you within the scope of what we've looked at today in terms of error handling. One of the really cool things is, of course, is that now that you've actually defined, this particular process, you can now, take this and just move it between other flows. So what I'm going to do here is just first of all, I always like to start blank when I'm doing something, and then put the try steps in here. Then you can just copy and paste the catch step over. So we're just going to paste that down here. And then you just need to make sure that you configure the run after. So when it's failed. And you can see all of these steps are just prepared already based upon what you've done previously. So you can very quickly build this information up. There's one final cherry on the cake that I know a lot of my viewers will appreciate on this particular channel, but it's how to view the logs that you have in App Insights inside of Power BI. So let's go and add that extra layer of interest so that you can then report on the errors that you're getting and the number of errors that you have. All right, so when you're in your Application Insights, in terms of connecting to Power BI, one of the easiest ways to do it that I found is you come into the log section over here, and then what we want to be able to do is just type, custom events. So because it will capture the information here, you don't need to do anything else in terms of filtering. You'll then see that you get all the results back that we basically saw before. So you can see all the different events that I've got here. And what I want to be able to do is to export these to Power BI. So if you actually export and then put as an M query, you'll then get the query text, which you can then see I have here in a notepad. And it will basically provide you with this information here. And if we do here get data from a blank query, then we go to the advanced editor and actually paste in the the M query that it provided. Will ask you to edit your credentials. You can then see that we actually were able to return the details into Power Query through authenticating them as well. And what you'll see is that in this particular column, all of the information is in a single string, and we want to be able to parse that. So if we select the column, click on parse, select JSON, it will then come up with these little, I call them inside out arrows. We can then determine that we want to keep all of the columns, and it will then provide you all of that information here as well. So it then has all of the extra source that we want to provide. We can then close and apply this, load the data in, and then we can have a little table. So we want to be able to present this URL more nicely. So we come back into the table, and then we change it here into a web URL. We'll then tidy the table up a little bit. We can even add a nice little graphic as well, a little card. And we can, of course, as well have a slider with the dates of when the errors have been recorded as well. So now we have a Power BI dashboard that we can use to be able to present back, the number of errors that we're having, and be able to, over time, hopefully show a trend of reducing those errors because we're actually able to see and surface that information moving forward. So let's quickly just summarize what we've done in the video today. So what we basically did was we built a simple error handling approach to add on to an existing flow, or to create across all of your different flows, that systematically goes through a number of steps to firstly provide the details of the error that happened in terms of the core system-based steps or actions that would be taken, writes an event inside of Application Insights via a HTTP call action, then creates a table, and then finally posts a notification in Teams to tell you that there's that there's been an error inside of your application. And then just to add a little bit of extra source to what we did, we also then pulled that information through the mQuery that's generated inside of the App Insights portal for us to be able to view those errors in a Power BI dashboard. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. It was a real privilege for me to be able to post a developer blog, especially given my, let's say, newness into the world of being a developer and having not worked so many years in that area. It's great to be able to see that I can hopefully provide value to other people who are using Power Platform to help in their development of applications in their organization. As always, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to read some of your comments down below about whether this was useful or whether this built upon your understanding already, or even if you have any suggestions on how to make this even better, because I think ultimately making it better would be great. And last but not least, don't forget to pay it forward, share the information with other people, connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know whether this was useful. Talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye.